Welcome to Talk Back. Today we will be discussing the impact of the WTO on service sectors in India. To do this, I have with me two eminent personalities, Mr. B.K. Zutshi, a distinguished civil servant who was the ambassador of India to GATT from 1989 to 1994 when the agreement was concluded. In fact, he is the man who negotiated the services agreement for India at the WTO. I also have with me here Mr. Devang Mehta, President of NASSCOM, the premier association of software industry in the country and the man who makes it happen in the new economy. Welcome. Now, when we talk about the services sector in India, there is always this question that GATT was all about trade in goods. Why did we have to agree to this extension of GATT to include services under the WTO? BK, you are the right person to ask this question.
Well, I would think that one of the main reasons why the services were brought into the multilateral trading system was the fact that developed countries were losing their competitiveness in the goods sector, and services was becoming a very important part of their economies. And services was the sector which was giving them both growth as well as employment. And on top of it, they were very competitive in this sector. And more importantly, there were technological developments which led to the increasing the tradability of services. As you know, as an economist, trade in services was considered an oxymoron at one time, that it was a contradiction in terms. And also, there was a dramatic development in the supply of utilities, power, telecommunications, which were at one point considered to be natural monopolies.
And non-traded goods.
Non-traded goods. And as a result of these developments, that the developed countries wanted services to be brought into the multilateral trading system so that they could apply a set of rules to them and going for orderly liberalization.
Devang, the developed countries wanted services to be included under the WTO because it was in their interest. Now, would you say that in many ways, India, when it comes to services, is really more like a developed country, and therefore, could one say that it is in our interest that we went into the services agreement? I mean, of course we had to, but it's also good for us.
See, that is the whole problem. The developed nations want something and we all agree. Mm-hmm. That is the first problem. And why, as Mr. Zutshi said, because in services they were trying to gain competitive advantage, they brought in. In that period of 85, 95, we were still not great in services. We are not yet. In software we have done, but what about other services? With the result, what has happened is, we are always forced to do things which we may not want to do. This orderly rules, this, trying to have rules, it is something which is governed by developed nations. Who is asking the developing nations? We don't have enough say, we don't have enough votes. We do not have, even many of the developing nations which are much smaller and not great in services have not even realized what they are getting into. Now that we are stuck with it, we will have to live with it, so we'll have to make best out of it. But I don't think it was a great idea any time, because at that time India itself did not know its potential in services. And I don't think the GATT's, whatever the rules are in favor of India. And we have seen it in software sector. In the last 10 years, we have had the major problems on visas around the world. GATT or WTO has not come to our rescue. Had those kind of rules not been there, I would feel we would have done our software exports at least double than what we are doing today.
Okay. Now, let me, at this stage, we will really focus more on whether it is good for India and not developing versus developed. We will not turn it into that. Now, if I were to put it to you like that, BK, would you agree with what Devang is saying, that India was not competitive or was not perceived to be competitive in services in 1994 when we signed the agreement, and therefore it was not in India's interest?
I would agree with the statement that in 1994 we were not competitive in several services. We are not competitive in several service sectors even today. But I have a major difference of view with Devang, in as much as he has given an impression that by our signing in 1994 we have as if liberalized all service sectors. We haven't. As a matter of fact, the beauty of this agreement, the great advantage of this agreement from the point of view of developing countries, is that it envisages liberalization, a gradual liberalization, which every country can craft for itself, taking into consideration its own development needs. What is the kind of commitments we have made? We have not made commitments which go beyond what we are actually practicing today by way of our regimes in various service sectors. As a matter of fact, our commitments are even less than what we are doing domestically.
Could you give some example of what you mean by a commitment that we have made, we may have made in a sector, and what we have done, how we've gone further?
I can give you several. Why one? For instance, take telecommunications, which is a major service sector. In telecommunications, we are operating a very liberal policy. As a matter of fact, we are furiously liberalizing. But our commitment in WTO, in the Uruguay round, is very, very modest. It was even less than what we were actually doing at that time. For instance, we are allowing 49% foreign direct investment
in the
telecommunication basic services sector. What we have committed under WTO in the services agreement is 25%. That's our commitment. Okay. Now take the financial services. We have gone much beyond what we have committed in WTO. What we have done in WTO is that we are allowing 5 branches, I think it's 8 branches per year, to be opened. And we have capped foreign investments and holdings in banking sector to 20% of off balance sheet and balance sheet assets put together.
This is what we have committed in the WTO.
Which is a very, very modest kind of a commitment.
Now, is your problem in principle with making any commitment, Devang?
Not at all. My issue is that we have gone into some agreement without even realizing our full potential. So with the result, what has happened is, for example, if I speak about software sector, movement of natural persons, taxation. For example, I'm a developing nation, or as in India, I feel that my strength is in software sector. Did we negotiate thinking what we will do in software sector in the next 10 years? No, we did not. So the issue is that whatever we wanted as a software industry, we never thought about it, and now we are stuck with it. I'm not concerned with commitment so much. Even today, for example, there is something called Information Technology Agreement at WTO. Unfortunately, is only for goods. It is not for services. Why? Because the developed nations, the Western countries, want to impose zero duty on all the countries on information technology products, but do not want to give any concessions in services. And we today in India are demanding an information technology agreement in services because we know our potential in it. And as a developing nation, or as India, we are demanding it.
Could you give an example of the information technology agreement in which, when you say goods are, they're zero duty, what kind of goods, for example?
Everything from computers to telecommunication equipment, anything which is, or radar system, everything. So there is, and we support it. We want zero duty. In fact,
we've done it.
We support zero duty on that. But we are saying, while we are agreeing for zero duty, we also have a problem when we have to export software to your countries, and that is regarding services, and also allow your boundaries to open up so that our people can work there, that we can take full potential and advantage of our competitive advantage. That is not happening. So we should have negotiated better.
But first of all, would you like to comment on this point that Devang has made on the information technology agreement, that extension to services is something you also support, or?
Isha, these are two different agreements, and I do not deny the fact that it is possible to have exchange concessions across agreements.
Yes.
So there is no problem that happens. As a matter of fact, the broad contour of the Uruguay round negotiations was that you traded concessions across sectors. And as an economist, liberalization in itself is very good, whether anyone does it or not. But the point is that the two things happened at two different times.
Yes.
The services agreement was concluded in 1994, and the IT goods agreement on tariffs, which I must say that it was a unique thing which happened, in as much as it was a single sector tariff agreement, which hadn't happened earlier. But it was done after the round was concluded in Singapore.
Right.
In the first ministry, which was 2 years after the agreement. Now, services are now being negotiated in the WTO today under a commitment which was made then itself, saying that after 5 years we will revisit this.
Yes.
So to the extent that Devang is suggesting that we did not negotiate and get concessions, I will make only 2 points. It is true that we did not get very much liberalization in terms of movement of natural persons. That movement of natural persons, we were going to, as you say, we are going to discuss it separately. But we ourselves did not make any concessions. The point is that we ourselves didn't make any concessions. Therefore, now it is a mercantilist kind of an approach, that if you make a concession, the other party evaluates what is its value for them. Then they offer you something, or you request, and then you evaluate what's your, its value for you.
Yeah.
And then you come to this kind of an
And you would also say that this IT agreement for goods is something which I take both of you support. That it's good for us. I mean, we would not have had of takeoff in the software sector if we didn't have access to these.
No, that's not the issue. The issue is good for our country, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
But the point is that the beauty of any international agreements is that even if you do not get any, do not make any concession, you make the other parties feel that you are actually giving in and you get something out of it. That's the smartness which you have to develop. That's how Americans have always done it. And the problem I face is, today because of the GATS, when I talk bilaterally with various countries on visa concessions, they said, but we are doing better than what we have committed at GATS. They have committed the lowest thing at the GATS. So what is the great deal?
Yeah. We'll come to the visa problem and the movement of natural persons. And with this advice from a practitioner to a former negotiator, let us go for a break. We'll be back soon to resume our discussion.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of Talkback. This evening we have as our guest
Welcome back. We were discussing the movement of natural persons. Now, I must first of all tell you that no ordinary human being can make sense of this expression. So I leave it to both of you in turn to convey to our viewers what is meant by the movement of natural persons. Devang.
Even for first 2-3 years when we were running the software industry, we didn't understand this term, because what we understood was getting visas and sending our people, But now that we understand this term and this terminology, let me try to explain what happens in our industry. The way we do software exports, mainly, there are 3 delivery methods. Most prominent and most, I would say, popular is sending your people to work at the client site abroad. What happens is, there is a Sears company or Walmart or Pepsi or Coca-Cola. They're developing software in Atlanta. So they say, well, can you do the software for us? They feel very uncomfortable that you are developing software 10,000 miles away. They won't be able to daily keep a check on what is happening. They may have 4 or 5 programmers in Atlanta. They may want your 4 or 5 programmers to come and work as a team physically at a location. So they say, you develop software, but send your people to our premises in USA and let them develop the software with us. Which means what I have to do, I have to first see what are the specifications of software, select the 4 or 5 people with the requisite experience, apply to the American embassy that these are the guys who are going to go to Atlanta to work for 6 months or 1 year because of the client's request, then at the mercy of the visa officer at American Embassy, these people would either go or not go. If he doesn't like the face, he doesn't go. He doesn't like her face, she doesn't go. If you finally go through, then you get the visa and then you land at the American airport and then you go there, you register yourself and you work for a period of 3 years. Currently H-1B visa allows you 3 years. And there are various issues involved with it. Actually, by rule, they will finish the work and come back to the country. The American law allows them also to migrate to America if they want to. That's only for USA. It's not, work permits are given in other countries, it's not allowed. This is called movement of natural persons across borders, geographical borders, so that they can work for a limited period of time in a foreign country and do the trade, which they could have done in their own country, but certain businesses want you to do.
So do you agree with the
I agree with him,
definition?
but I want to supplement what trade in services under the services agreement can take place through 4 different ways. One is cross-border. That is, there is no movement of either the producer or the consumer of the service. An example is telecommunications, is a telephone call or it's transfer of money by electronic means. The second mode is where the consumer himself goes to the other market and consumes the service there.
Like tourism.
Like tourism, someone undergoing a surgery or even people going for education to other markets. And the third is where the investment takes place in your market by an outsider. They invest in setting up a service company or a joint venture, which is not traditionally supposed to be a trade, but under this definition. And the fourth one is where an individual person goes and provides the service, like professional services, a lawyer.
Which is what Devang has just
this is what
described.
Devang was talking about. But it's also linked not only to individuals, but also to the other mode, that is where the investment takes place.
But the normal complaint is that at the time that the services agreement was negotiated, we did not negotiate hard enough to get more liberalization on visas and other such things in other countries to enable us to have more movement of natural persons, which would have given further fillip to our. Now, would you agree with that?
I don't know. I will. I might be seen as partisan because, as you said, that I was responsible. But I don't think that it's a fair assessment to say that we didn't try hard enough.
More would not have been possible.
No, I will tell you why more wouldn't have been possible. First of all, movement of people across borders is a very, very sensitive issue, not only among developed countries, but also among developing countries themselves.
Correct.
Now, therefore, although conceptually and theoretically you can talk about, symmetry between the movement of factors, labor and capital, but in actual fact, movement of capital and movement of people are two different things in the political economy sense. Therefore, it is true that we did not get much liberalization, but what we have been able to achieve, which is a great thing, is a foot in the door. That is to say that immigration policies and immigration law is now a part of the international treaty, which was not there earlier. And it is quite likely, and I expect that there is going to be considerable liberalization attention to this in the current round.
Devang, wouldn't you say that the markets are really working in your favor when Germany wakes up, Japan says, come
there is a whole issue.
Professionals?
Multilateral agreement is not coming to my rescue. It is my bilateral agreement which is coming to my rescue today, because we have shown the strength. Mr. Jutsi, we treat him like a guru. I mean, he has done great service for the country. So I don't disagree with his statement that they did the best. But the point is, well, there is a problem in Government of India we believe in, that one department and the second department never, understood each other. So obviously we don't blame the negotiator. I mean, the government itself didn't have their plan of action in place. The point is that today it is for example, e-commerce. Now, our issue was, why did we have to include this in multilateral agreements? Today, I'll give you a small example. There's a lady called Mancha Ben who lives in a village called Khim in Gujarat. No electricity there. We went to give her an award, and she makes very good designs with mirror work and tie and dye work. So while talking to her, we said, why don't you make a tie? And this poor lady in the village, she had never seen a tie. So she said, why do you what is a tie? So we said, well, this is a tie. She says, very intelligent question, why do you wear a tie? I mean, I tell you, I had no answer, so gave him some reason. But actually I found on the net that people used to wear a tie in medieval times so that they could wipe out their mouth and hands after eating lunch or dinner. The point is, we gave her a tie, and after 3 months she made a tie, 10 samples. We put that on an internet website, peoplelink.org. After that, a major tie store from UK and USA came to us, said, we want to, we're interested. We took them to Manchaben. We collected 250 women. They got an order, 10,000 ties. They delivered the ties. But now the questions are coming in. Was it under a textile quota? Was it under this services? I mean, what is this?
No,
this is
e-commerce. Whether or not you have a multilateral agreement, the point is these questions will come up.
No,
by having a system of rules.
But it is not helping. The point is that today, as you rightly said, in IT industry, there is 500,000 people required in the world. That's why every country is coming to India. But when I was knocking the door, I was using GATS, I was using anything, they were not bothered. So first of all, we have to realize in the world that you have to be in the position of strength. If you are in a position of strength, GATS, no GATS, you can actually do the work which you want to. So I'm very happy that today, when you're in a position of strength, now we want to use GATS and see that it is used to my advantage, and the countries who bilaterally want people from me would better listen to me.
But I must say one thing here, BK.
That no, I'm confused now.
I know. Yeah, but I must put a question to you. I know. You see, the GE chairman, Jack Welch, was in town 2 weeks ago, and he made a very powerful presentation where he was saying that if you really want to succeed in the IT sector, software exports and all from India, his major concern was that we are not doing enough on the power sector. So, today it's not GATS or no GATS, but unless we really do domestic infrastructure reform on power and telecom, will we really be able to sustain this kind of performance?
We won't. No, getting back to Devang's point, Devang is making the point we would be better off bilaterally than multilaterally. I have a very, very serious disagreement with that. Not only I have a disagreement, I think this assessment is not correct, in as much as it is a weaker trading partner which needs the multilateral cover. If we were the United States, we wouldn't need it.
But you see, he is talking from a position of strength in software. That's where that
assessment is now I'm saying, now we want to use GATS. See, I have two different views about it. Now that I have made my strength in the software sector, I would like to use it to my advantage. But I have not been able to use it to my advantage all these years. That is the issue.
Now, bilaterally also, we
you
would
could
not
have done.
No,
exactly.
we
have done that.
No, the point is...
We are today, for example, US has increased its H-1B visa to 200,000 people. That is not because of GATS. That's because US has a shortage of people and we can supply the people.
I think you have to answer that question. You have a different perception. It's good to put it on the table.
No, it is true. After all, when we are doing liberalization, we are doing it in our own interest. We are not doing it in the interest of the United States. So every partner, every trading partner who negotiates on the basis of what is in it for him. So you exchange a concession. And so long as there is some kind of a balance of benefits, you think you got something. That's the point I made earlier, is that we did not make any concessions in services.
No, but I think there is a very fundamental point that is being raised here, which is that if you are in a position of strength, you can get a better deal bilaterally than going through the multilateral route. Now, do you agree with that?
This is precisely what we fought the United States over 301.
Yes.
This is precisely what we thought. What we wanted. He's looking only Devang. I have a great regard.
He has the bigger view.
He has. What we have to do is that we are potentially. We have great potential export opportunities in a whole host of services sectors, provided we undertake to strengthen those sectors, undertake domestic reform and improve the supply side.
Yes.
Now, if we do that, then you will become a great trading nation in services or goods.
And therefore you
until then, you need the multilateral system where you can survive. the threats of 301 and 301 type of legislation.
And what is more, Devang, what would you say that in any case, even when you were strong, you would need a multilateral system of rules and disciplines in order not to convert the world trading regime into a jungle?
No, I am not disagreeing with that.
Yeah.
I mean, we all want to go by certain rules. I'm saying today we can take advantage of GATS.
Yeah.
What I've said is that till now we have not been able to take advantage. On the contrary, we have lost out. We had an income tax exemption issue. Now we are in a developing mode. We wanted income tax exemption for a couple of years. The reason given, GATS will not allow you export SOPs. Why should we listen to GATS? We have our own issue in our country, as you rightly said about infrastructure. Till I do not get my power, till I do not get my telecom tariff in place, I want certain other concessions so that I am competitive enough. And every nation does that. We are not the only one. So the issue is, that's the reason we have a new slogan. Roti kapda makan, bijli or bandwidth. It is this bijli or bandwidth which will give us roti kapda or makan. We have to understand that.
Well,
I have to make one last point. Is Devang is not right in suggesting that in the services government cannot give concession to service industry because of the GATS agreement.
that is not true. What
That
he
is
said.
not true.
Well, the government has told
GATS.
me.
That may be true of GATS, but not of GATS.
Okay, well, on that note, I really must thank both of you for this very stimulating discussion, and we will be back again, same time, same day, next week on Talkback. Goodbye.